First, that the Cambodian government should support impartial uh, um, mechanisms towards truth seeking, even when it is painful. These are painful truths, and it was discussed in our session that truth seeking in a way that it doesn't just say talk about what happened, but why and how this happened, so that it won't be repeated again. And the discussion is that truth seeking is very important if we want to understand how we should prevent it, and should be used as a foundation in order to counter authoritarianism, to promote democratization process in the country. But more importantly, truth-seeking does not take only the form of the truth commissions. It takes the form of mainstreaming of information to the public, especially the younger generations. There was an example of local and community level mainstreaming of the past. It's making the public and the younger generation understand and remember the past. And not just about the genocide, but what led to that genocide. What are the, not just the role of Khmer Rouge, but what is the commission and omission of a lot of other parties, the international community, neighboring countries, etc., so that we would understand what is really the complete picture of why these things happened, and why democracy failed to take why democracy failed during that time. More than that is there's also the recommendation of empowering the role of people, especially the young people, and the importance of organizing and mobilizing peoples. This was shared in the case of South Korea, wherein the role of civil society was key in institutionalizing institutions that towards truth-seeking and justice, and the government should support this rather than prevent this. Also, more than the usual the political legal side, there's also some recommendations as to the material and economic side, which is improving public social services, making the people really feel the benefits of peace, of the peace accord, making sure that people are not economically disempowered in the process. There are issues of land grabbing, etc., that still is happening, and that should be addressed. National budget should be allocated in the right way. And all these issues, the Cambodian government should deal with dissent and with political crisis in through negotiations, and use that to transform the structures to a better setup. On the recommendation to the international community, the suggestion is that the 18 signatories should review and take actions on what they committed on the PPA, increase the role of UN and international communities on the PPA on Cambodia, and should investigate human rights violations. But there's also the point raised that the international community itself should also be consistent when it comes to its stand on democracy and human rights. There was a point on what was the role in the past of the international community in supporting the Khmer Rouge, legitimizing Khmer Rouge during that time, and that affects its legitimacy now in dealing with the current administration, in asserting that the current administration should follow principles of human rights and democracy. So that's all.
Great, thank you so much. We'll go ahead to MOOC on, she'll update us on the democratization and democratic government.
Okay. On the workshop to democratization and democratic governance, the speakers are His Excellency Hirum Kyo from CNRP Cambodia, and Kumpanya from Comprel Cambodia, and Ishal Supriya from Unfair Asian Network for Free Elections. So talking about positive developments, right now election commission and the new registration process is taking place, and CNRP opposition party committed to free and fair elections. And Comparing with the elections in 1993, right now there are less physical violence and trauma. And right now, more young voters and migrant workers with less poverty and better human development are taking part in the electoral process as well as democratization. And the decreased numbers of Western countries and donor UN interventions in the electoral process at national level. And right now, social media has been playing a huge role in terms of mobilization. And right now, the opportunity posed by close political race between CPP and CNRP, as well as the growth of civil society, more CSO and community-based organizations have been playing a role as well in terms of democratization. Negative development. There was a coup in 1997 and bloodshed. A new legislation designed to limit the fundamental freedoms of Cambodian people as well as political freedoms. Legislation process does not necessarily include citizen participation, and political party should enhance the platform for people to participate in terms of law-making process. An opposition party leader, Sam Rangsi, is now outside the country and stripped of his status as member of parliament, as well as Kem Sokha, who is a deputy opposition party leader, who is now criminalized following the summon of HCU. NEC Commissioner Nichakra is now also in jail, and also there's ongoing legal harassment against civil society. 4 ad hoc staff now are in jail as well, and members of parliament are still arrested, despite of their immunity as a member of parliament. And CPP ruling party has strong influence on military, police, and the judicial system and the court. And development somehow has brought more social problems and inequality. And the influence by new power like China, with the less interest in supporting democracy and political rights. And even if social media has been playing a huge role in terms of mobilization, ruling parties still control mainstream media like TV, television, newspapers, and radio. And in the last 2013 election, the environment was not enabling for free and fair elections because it was full of unclean water lists and also systematic violation and use of state resources inadequate electoral dispute resolution or electoral justice, as well as more than 10,000 cases of poll and counting irregularities. So now it comes to the recommendation for Cambodian government. So the group called on the government to review Paris Peace Accord not only as an agreement to end the war, but as also the basis to establish the democratic government and to bring about the unity in Cambodia. And the group further called on international standard of PPP as endorsed by UN and other 18 signatory countries. So we call the standard as a liberal democracy with pluralism and free and fair elections. And NEC should play NEC as a bipartisan committee is a positive development, ensure that they are able to carry out their work of implementation of election laws on political parties and codes of conduct, as well as to ensure fair process. Regarding to pre-election, enforce the neutral role of military, calling on them to respect the laws, as well as release all political prisoners and human rights defenders, and cease all legal harassments against civil society. The next one, indicators of democratic elections to provide a legal framework for free and fair elections and ensure a level playing field, professionalism of NEC, ensure inclusive and meaningful participation, ensure transparency on voting and counting, ensure effective, efficient and impartial electoral justice and election dispute resolution, as well as to ensure the peaceful and smooth transfer of power. And there's also a need for greater electoral process transparency, thorough and impartial investigation, and also Cambodian government has to nurture a culture of dialogue by convening internal dialogue between the ruling party and the opposition party, and nurture a culture of trust among Cambodian people by ensuring transparency in governance and in the electoral process. And Cambodian government might need to consider amnesty arrangement and amnesty law to ensure peaceful transfer of power while balancing consideration to address impunity. And recommendation for international community on the PPA see the lack of support for the PPA by 18 signatories and seek international support from both CSO in the spirit of PPA. Establish monitoring bodies for PPA with the task of monitoring, investigating, documenting implementation of the PPA, and on elections and citizen participation, establish election monitoring bodies or network to do advocacy, monitoring and assessment of pre-electoral situations, and deploy international election observers with the presence in all provinces, capital at least one team per province, and support the program on active citizen participation in politics and elections through civic education program, in particular for youth, migrant worker, and marginalized groups. That's all.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we'll move on to workshop 3 on human rights. Dabi?
Yes, thank you. So I think the general consensus is when it comes to human rights in Cambodia, it's uh-oh, we're in trouble. But there is some positive development that was mentioned in discussion. Most of it revolved around the very strong foundation that Cambodia has in its constitution, where most human rights treaties and the general concept of human rights is accepted and absorbed in the constitution itself, which gives a very good platform for future development. But this is with a big problem that most of this ratified convention and the imposition in the constitution is not reflected in reality, where a lot of the ratified conventions are not practiced, they are not implemented, human rights violations still happens. And even though like the United Nations has active mission in Cambodia, they accepted a special rapporteur to Cambodia, but there's always a rocky relationship going on between the Cambodian government and the United Nations. Other negative issues that they have is the government is obviously going on a crackdown due to the political instability they perceive themselves to be in, and as a result, been stifling freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, in order to retain political dominance. And this also extends to the judiciary, where they lack independence. There's a growing culture of impunity, or sustained one, and there's a crackdown on plurality of opinion, growing climate of fear, and restricted information, or the lack of freedom of information in general. So those are some of the general problems that seems to be occurring. But our moderators and our speakers also came up with quite a few observations. So there's an observation that there needs to be a status to find out or to develop what's the game plan for the next election, what will come and what would happen. As one of the implications that was mentioned by the Member of Parliament this morning was that in the event the government wins, there may be a people's uprising. And in the event the opposition wins, there may be a possibility of coup d'etat. So it's something that needs to be considered for the betterment of human rights. And there was also the observation that there has not been an experience of peaceful transfer of power, and that should be explored. Other observations include that internet seems to be the last bastion for freedom of expression in Cambodia and needs to be protected. Politicians, regardless of which part of the political divide they come from, needs to be held accountable. And that there's an interesting observation that the government seems to be putting pressure on the NGO and opposition members alternatively. So one day you'll be the opposition and the next will be the NGO. So from these observations and findings, the session made a few recommendations for the Cambodian government. One, to ensure that all legislation adopted complies with international human rights principles. Amend the existing legislation which does not comply to comply with international human rights. Endeavor to develop peaceful power transfer in the event of political change. And have a transparent drafting procedure for new laws and inclusive consultation. And as for the recommendation for international community, some of the recommendations made include to have signatories take a more proactive role in the situation in Cambodia, to get them to have a proactive role in recognizing the lack of judicial independence and not allow that to cloud their judgment on the situation in Cambodia, to acknowledge the possibility that Cambodia has a strategy of appeasement to ratification of human rights treaties, and it should not be taken on face value that it is a progressive thing. And lastly, to retain the strategy to ensure that there is a sustained and persistent pressure on the government in regards to human rights violation, so that the government cannot just tide out on the first wave of complaints and pressure and repeat what they've been doing after that. So that's the quick, messy sum of everything we discussed in that session. I'll pass it back to moderator.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so I guess towards the end we will have the floor add in more and do an overall discussion. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll have the next workshop moderators come up and do their presentations. So workshop 4, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and international development. Anselmo, sustainable development and social inclusion. Steve, and cooperation with the international community. Yeah. Oh, you're also okay. MOOC. Okay. Workshop 4. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so we'll just start with 4 then. MOOC.
Okay, workshop 4 on rehabilitation, reconstruction, and international development cooperation. Talking about positive development, there are clear indicators that Cambodia has made a significant progress from 1993 to today. For example, basic infrastructure has improved to a certain extent, and literacy rate was increased as well as Cambodia has improved life expectancy. And poverty rate, for example, in 1997, almost 50% were living under the poverty line. In 2012, there was only 17.7. But all these social development that comes through investments and development projects also have caused some other social problems, for example, land grabbing, the violation of labor rights, as well as inequality in the society. And from the discussion, so public administration reform, negative development. Public administration reform has not made an impressive progress so far, and despite of economic growth, the group realized that it's very concentrated on certain sectors, for example, government sector, construction and tourism, and also mining. And poor governance and bad human rights record also play a role regarding to this concentrated economic development in a way, because investors don't trust the capacity of the government in terms of investment in other areas. Electoral reform is also needed, as it was stipulated in PBA. And ODA still contributes 50% to the national budget, but almost 35% is all loan. And governance and corruption remains as a challenge for Cambodia. And another challenge is the increase of loan taken by the government, and it's going to be more and more in the future. The recommendation. The government should find the balance, should strike the balance to work between the traditional donors and non-traditional donors. And the ideal recommendation is to bring traditional and non-traditional donors together in terms of finding the way to work on investment and also development in the country. Governance and democracy in Cambodia should be strengthened for sustainable development, and international community should find a way to engage with Cambodia not only on economic development but also human rights and democracy. And people-centered development discourse should be mainstreamed and discussed widely in the society. And yeah, 5 main recommendations from the group. So revisiting foreign investment supply chain, the first one, and the second one, donors must make sure that ODA it would be used for social development and distribution, not only for corruption and concentrated amongst government officials only, especially non-traditional and not new non-traditional ODA like China, as well as traditional ODA as Western countries. Diasporas and migrant workers should be mobilized for the social change, long-term social change and democratic change in the country. And the fourth recommendation, in case signatory parties to PPA, as the government don't make a move or don't make a progress in terms of urging Cambodia government to be to follow the agreements in PPA, civil society can identify at least one organization from all signatory parties and set up the alternative version of PPA. And the fifth recommendation, foreign policies and investment from China needs to be revisited, as is a common challenge throughout the region, not only in Cambodia. Yeah, that's all.
Great, thanks, Book. I'll hand it over to Steve on workshop 5.
Okay, so the workshop on sustainable development and social inclusion. We had 3 presentations. The first was from Takbana from NGO Forum. That really focused on starting off with looking at different aspects of sustainability, of social sustainability, economic sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And then focusing a little bit more specifically on the forestry sector, looking at the forestry concessions that have happened in Cambodia in the past and their effects on livelihoods, environmental protection, and resource management. There is a reflection that the balance between environmental management and capital investment has been off in previous years, and that there may even be people playing to different standards. So international institutions having one standard of environmental protections and things like that, which is different from others. There's a reflection that the environmental management really seen as benefiting the few rather than the many, and that the citizens that own that land or have been there for a long time. And also reflecting on land ownership in terms of not just about land concessions, but also around housing ownership as well, and with how many people are not actually indebted to bank loans in terms of their ownership. In addition to that, there were some reflections on migration and the impact that migration has actually had on the economic development and sustainable development of Cambodia. Some recommendations included that there was a great need for increased democratization in Cambodia, that economic development needed to continue, especially through businesses, agribusiness, and small businesses looking at driving local consumption as well as regional and international trade. And that human resource development needed to focus beyond the traditional sectors and head into more of the technology sectors and prepare Cambodia's workforce for future industries. The fourth recommendation really looked at enhancing and building social safeguards to reduce the gaps between rich and poor. The second presentation from U Tepalen from the Cambodian Food and Services Workers Federation. started with reflections on the prevalence of human rights in the Paris Peace Agreements, and specifically then looking at the freedom of association, freedom of collective bargaining, and the right to protest in the workplace. We had a really informative and helpful history of the union movement in Cambodia, following changes to the labour law in 1997, which really was a significant shift, through changes to ways of engaging with foreign trading partners, especially the EU and the US. The effects of shooting of union leaders in 2004. All this to kind of demonstrate the growth of a union movement in Cambodia since the early 90s that is quite young but has been very, very strong and dynamic. We also reflected a little bit on the issue of maternity leave rights and women's rights, and the recommendations that came from that presentation were to look at the types of contracts that are being offered to workers, especially stopping shorter term contracts, and ensuring collective bargaining for workers, dropping charges against union leaders in the work that they're doing, and reviewing the current union laws in relation to the way that they limit freedoms and human rights in Cambodia. Also looking at that continued need for increased minimum wages, as the current minimum wage, even with recent increases, is still not enough for workers to live their lives. And looking at some of those practical issues around further development of the workforce, like transportation of workers, especially in garment factories. The third presentation was a really helpful one from Primrodi from Project Savannah, which really broadened us out to a regional perspective, looking at the influences of other countries, neighbours to Cambodia, and other multinational corporations that also work within Cambodia, and how they have affected the last 25 years and will continue to affect the future of Cambodia. Looking at examples such as the Lower Sesson Dam and sugar plantations in Odamanche. Helpful reminder of the significant reliance that the Cambodian economy has on the river industries. I think 12% of Cambodian GDP was what was presented. And that in the future there is still a number of hydropower dams that are in proposal that could have continued impact on Cambodia. The question really came down to, did we learn lessons from the past? That the things that we have seen from Sesson Dam, and are those things going to be repeated? There was a reflection that there are many big actors in terms of companies that are involved in these agreements, and even when they move out and move away from those agreements, that their governments are left to deal with that between governments and then their people, and between governments and citizens, and that creates a whole lot of tensions that are left beyond the scope of the company that initially caused those differences. The recommendations really were around have greater social inclusion in development in future, how to really take the role of local people more seriously, and reflecting on the input and wisdom, ideas and answers from local people in terms of in responding to local issues, and how that NGOs and civil society in Cambodia has developed differently from other countries in the region, rather than being driven from a grassroots level, and having really been very grounded in political representation, actually have more centralized birthing coming from Phnom Penh, and now struggling to gain those kind of connections with local communities. And reflecting on whether what that means for civil society in Cambodia in the future. There was a big reflection that issues of environmental challenges that Cambodia has faced and human rights challenges are one and the same, or are very, very linked, and have in the past and will continue to be in the future. And so there's a recommendation to acknowledge that, and really to look in future at the changing role of the international community, the donors, as Cambodia continues to have a significant amount of ODA and foreign investment. What is the role of that over the next 25 years, over the next years, as that kind of shifts, which will be different from the years before.
Great, thank you, Steve. I'll hand it over now to Phil to update us on cooperation with international.
Thank you very much. The discussion was a bit varied, but there was a discussion about some of the areas of progress that has happened over the past 15 years.
particularly discussion of the development of the economy, the growth rates, the economic growth rates, an excellent track record by the Cambodian government in meeting almost all the MDGs except for the one involving the environment. There was discussion about enormous improvements in health and education and connectivity, and discussion, I think, also about the role of the international community in providing aid and assistance to support that. There was also discussion about another positive aspect of the engagement, which is a sort of significant reduction over that period of time in what was referred to as the Wild West aspect of Cambodia, which was, the previously widely available firearms, drugs, issues related to sex trade, etc. The downside, which was discussed, was that there was a continued unsustainable use of resources, and that the government is noted to have been involved in straightforward exploitation of natural resources for a very small group of people. So the discussion on that area was all about the economic side, but when discussing it in the view of the international community engaging with Cambodia, it was noted that the political relations between the government and the opposition parties have not really changed at all, and that the discourse is still fundamentally not changed in a positive way, and that over the past year there's clearly been a movement in the wrong direction in terms of actions against opposition leaders and NGOs. A narrowing of space of opposition, a narrowing of space for the opposition, the NGOs, to operate. What was termed a negative movement against a background of expectations that things would be getting better. Now, in terms of the engagement with the international community and the government, especially discussing about human rights, it was noted by one of the diplomatic representatives that really, the diplomatic community doesn't really use the Paris Peace Accords when they go in to talk with the government about these issues. They reference the Cambodian Constitution, they reference the international human rights treaties that Cambodia has ratified, but it's not, we're going there to tell you that you need to do this because the Paris Peace Agreement was signed back in 1991 contained some guarantees for these things. It's simply not the center part of the conversation. Other issues that were discussed were, dealing with how the international community can play a role in working with and empowering the people. How the voices of the people being heard. How can also the international community be instilling a certain degree of stability and standards to all sides of the political dynamic, because, as was mentioned, the political discourse between the two sides, particularly the opposition to the government, is still quite poor. There was discussion about the international community needing to be much more forceful in protecting the UN human rights mechanisms. This is the OHCHR office here, the special rapporteur. It was mentioned what we heard in the morning from Yash Gai about the problems he faced when he was special rapporteur in terms of the sort of invective that was hurled at him by Hun Sen. I think that the other thing that really came together was that, how, when you talk about international community engagement with the Cambodian government, how practical is this group of Paris Peace Accord signatories? We're talking about 18 signatories. 9 of them are ASEAN members. And it was noted that, in fact, ASEAN has an ongoing operating principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of the member states. So if you're actually looking at trying to get a group of the signatories to work together to try to put pressure on Cambodia to meet its obligations under the Paris Peace Accords, will this really work? Will this sort of group of international signatories be able to come together around that, when at least half of them are probably not going to want to raise human rights issues with Cambodia. Finally, we got into a longer discussion also about what's going to happen and what is required to sort of deal with a possible peaceful transfer of power. and what the international community could be involved in doing related to that. And that really boiled down to how to build trust between the two sides, between the opposition and the government. How to, perhaps have the international community serve as a guarantor. Certain states within the international community that have a degree of legitimacy to serve as a guarantor for such a transition. How to get the two sides, the opposition and the government, to recognize each other's legitimacy and try to overcome what is quite a serious trust deficit between the two sides. It was noted that finally that for something to be done in terms of that sort of transfer of power, you would probably need one or two things. Either need an amnesty for the outgoing government in terms of what they had done in the past, or some sort of power sharing arrangement. And again, the international community was, particularly members of the international community, United States and others, were mentioned as key guarantors in that process. So I think those are the major points that were made. It was a conversation that shifted back and forth from a number of different topics, so it perhaps was not as cohesive as some of the other ones.
Great, thank you. I think we have about until 4:45 before the special rapporteur comes, right? Yeah. So up until that time, I guess I'll kind of open it up to the floor to kind of discuss some of the recommendations and suggestions made. We do have a drafting team here. They're currently drafting a document so we could give it to the government. I believe that they're having their own Paris Peace Accords conference tomorrow, so we're hoping that we could release it to them tomorrow. So I think we could open it up if there's anything that should be added, something that should be more deliberated on. Any questions from the floor at all? Or suggestions?
I prefer to speak Khmer again. Can I? Okay, thank you. Right. Nhưng hai việc là mong muốn trong ban xua sầm lúa class tay ọt toàn ọt hay ọt quân đại ban đòn cả và nhiệt mấy môn đừng nhom xua sầm lúa trong còn ở trong bộ sai tam mà cũng được rồi bỏ chôn chiết Khmer mà nè đại cao là lừa tập đây nắng hồi chua ốp sạ vậy cột giang lừa nè bộ lừa và vì mỏng con chớn chỉ thấy để sao tại ở đây được trong vô cơ thà ai nâng khó bên đây sản phẩm thà việc mình nâng chui thưa cả cài trái thì mũi nơi sản phẩm Khmer tăng việc nhom rung nơi máu tăng phục mà đây nhom bong ôn nhom hay nhom miền bong ôn đọc bốn nè miền của sa chớn ở đây được trong mưa khơi cho ba chuyện cái cứ san phiệt là vô vai cứ ọt miền đai miền lủng nâng nơi Việt Nam muối cứ tayจะเวียนปะไว้ที่นี่ตะเวนจะเมาหรือก่อนนโยบายโยเทียคือធ្វើការកាប់សម្រាប់នេះតะเวนจะเมาចន្លោះពីឆ្នាំ69រហូតដល់ឥឡូវនៅតែមានបញ្ហានយោបាយចំណុចទី2ពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹងភាពមិនឯករាជ្យនៃយោធាពីព្រោះបើសិនបើយើងគិតថាពេលតែធ្វើបាតកម្មម្ដងហើយឆ្នាំ2012 2013មានការបាញ់សម្លាប់កើតឡើងចេញពីក្រមយោធាក្រមទាហានប៉ូលីសការវាយធ្វើបាបសកម្មជនសិទ្ធិមនុស្សសកម្មជនដែលធ្វើការផ្សព្វផ្សាយអំពីលទ្ធិប្រជាធិបតេយ្យគឺនៅតែមានការធ្វើបាបភ័យធ្ងន់ធ្ងរជាងហ្នឹងដែលបងកានលៃទើបតែមរណភាពរយៈពេល3ខែចុងក្រោយនេះចំណុចទី3គឺតាក់ទងទៅនឹងប្រព័ន្ធយុត្តិធម៌ពេលដែលពួកខ្ញុំចាប់ដើមធ្វើការងាររឿងដីធ្លីរឿងរ៉ែរឿងដីសម្បត្តិសេដ្ឋកិច្ចនៅតំបន់ឆ្ងាយជនជាតិដើមភាគតិចគឺរឿងហ្នឹងកើតឡើងដដែលដោយសារតែប្រព័ន្ធយុត្តិធម៌ហ្នឹងគឺអត់យុត្តិធម៌ហើយបងព្រៀបកលក៏បានធ្វើរង្ហាញម្សិលមិញដែរបងបានបង្ហាញយ៉ាងច្បាស់ថាប្រជាជន90% ជាងដែលបានធ្វើការឆ្លើយតាមប្រព័ន្ធអនឡាញហ្នឹងគឺ 90% ជាងជឿថាប្រព័ន្ធយុត្តិធម៌នៅស្រុកខ្មែរអត់មាន 90% ជាងក្នុងចំណោមមនុស្សដែលបានឆ្លើយសំណួរហ្នឹង ចំណុចទី4គឺតាក់ទងទៅនឹងដីសម្បត្តិសេដ្ឋកិច្ចព្រៃឈើរ៉ែផលិតផលក្នុងស្រុកទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងគឺគ្រប់គ្រងដោយបរទេសពីព្រោះ 70% ជាងគឺយើងនាំផលិតផលអាហារហូបចុកចេញមកពីវៀតណាមហើយនិងថៃហើយប្រហែលជាស្ទើរតែ 100% គឺផលិតផលប្រើប្រាស់តាំងពីទូរស័ព្ទតាំងពីតុកៅអីគ្រប់សពបែបយ៉ាងបច្ចេកវិទ្យាផ្សេងៗអញ្ចឹងការគ្រប់គ្រងដោយបរទេសនេះធ្វើឲ្យមានអតិផរណាកើនឡើងគ្រប់កន្លែងទាំងអស់គ្រូបង្រៀនមានប្រាក់ខែ200ប៉ុន្តែត្រូវចាយ500ក្នុងមួយខែឬក៏កម្មករអង្គចក្រមានប្រាក់ខែ110ឬក៏150ប៉ុន្តែត្រូវចាយពី300ក្នុងមួយខែអញ្ចឹងការដែលគ្មានលំនឹងសេដ្ឋកិច្ចការគ្រប់គ្រងទីផ្សារដោយបរទេសនេះគឺជាចំណុចទី4ហើយចំណុចចុងក្រោយគឺទុនជនអន្តោប្រវេសន៍ខ្មែរយើងទៅថៃរាប់លានហើយទៅកូរ៉េទៅម៉ាឡេហើយបន្ទាប់មកគឺជនជាតិវៀតណាមឬក៏ជនជាតិផ្សេងទៀតមករស់នៅលើទឹកដីខ្មែរដោយគ្មានច្បាប់គ្មានទម្លាប់ត្រឹមត្រូវមានការរើសអើងពូជសាសន៍កើតឡើងតាមប្រព័ន្ធមេឌៀច្រើនមែនទែនជាទូទៅក្នុងរយៈពេល4ខែចុងក្រោយឃើញមានបង្ហោះរឿងជេរយួនជេរអីច្រើនហើយមូលហេតុហ្នឹងគឺដោយសារតែកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងក្រុងប៉ារីសមិនយកទៅអនុវត្តហើយខ្ញុំហ៊ាននិយាយអញ្ចឹងដោយមូលហេតុមានតែមូលហេតុ2ទេដែលខ្ញុំមើលឃើញទី1តាំងពីអ៊ុនតាក់បានចូលកាន់កាប់ដីខ្មែរ1991ចន្លោះ91 93គឺគាត់អត់បានធ្វើឲ្យទាំងប្រព័ន្ធតុលាការទាំងប្រព័ន្ធព័ត៌មានហើយទាំងយោធា3ចម្ពោះហ្នឹងគឺអត់មានឯករាជ្យមុននឹងអ៊ុនតាក់ចេញទៅហើយនេះគឺជាមូលហេតុដែលធ្វើឲ្យកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងក្រុងប៉ារីសមិនអាចអនុវត្តបានតាំងពីពេលហ្នឹងរឿងអីមាននាយករដ្ឋមន្ត្រី2នៅឆ្នាំ93អញ្ចឹងទំនួលខ្ញុំចង់សួរទៅដោយសារតែវាជាការប្រជុំថ្នាក់តំបន់ថាតើមានយន្តការអ្វីដែលថ្នាក់តំបន់ហ្នឹងអាចធ្វើការផ្ដល់សិទ្ធិអំណាចមកឲ្យជនជាតិខ្មែរដែលរស់នៅលើទឹកដីនេះអាចមានឱកាសធ្វើឲ្យកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងក្រុងប៉ារីសនេះរស់ឡើងវិញរដ្ឋាភិបាលគ្រប់ពេលដែលត្រូវបានសម្ភាសរដ្ឋាភិបាលគាត់ថាកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងក្រុងប៉ារីសនេះគឺលែងមានប្រសិទ្ធភាពហើយបានន័យថាចាត់ទុកជាមោឃៈហើយមិនអាចយកមកប្រើបានទេប៉ុន្តែមូលហេតុទាំង5ដែលខ្ញុំបានលើកឡើងខាងលើគឺដោយសារតែកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងក្រុងប៉ារីសអត់បានប្រើទើបឲ្យប្រព័ន្ធយុតិធធម៌ប្រព័ន្ធព័ត៌មានទាហានប៉ូលីសគឺមិនបានរស់នៅក្នុងភាពឯករាជ្យជាប្រព័ន្ធទាំង3ហ្នឹងគឺស្ថិតនៅក្រោមមនុស្សមិនមែនស្ថិតនៅក្រោមប្រទេសមិនមែនស្ថិតនៅក្រោមផលប្រយោជន៍រួមរបស់ប្រទេសជាតិមួយនេះសូមអរគុណ
Okay, thank you for all those issues that you raised. I think they're very important, and I think a lot of them are going to be covered in the draft. And as for your question, I think that kind of goes back to what Mr. Klein also mentioned this morning with the Paris Peace Accords. How is it possible that maybe we could, institutionalize, have an institutionalized body in Cambodia that, equipped with the signatories that can monitor the situation. So I kind of want to throw it back. Is this a strategy that could be used? Is it possible to develop a permanent secretary to kind of follow up on the Paris Peace Accords and actually have it more impact the implementation? Anyone who would be able to?
I mean, my view is why not? If they're talking about trying to create some sort of ongoing meeting amongst the Paris Peace Accord signatories to make something happen, that would be well worthwhile. The issue is that ideally you don't want that kind of forum hijacked by the Cambodian government to sort of give them an all clear that everything is fine and, let's stop talking about the Paris Peace Accords now.
I think one major point that was mentioned in the cooperation and international community or something like that, one of the group was that the government of Mr. Hun Sen, Mr. CPP, still feel themselves isolated by the international community. You see? They felt isolated in the 80s and 90s, and up to today not a normal relationship with the Western superpowers. Even though Mr. Hun Sen himself has negotiated to have all his children being studied there, one thing. Therefore, any accomplishment or pressure upon the civil society will have no effect, because there will be no a country that makes a difference on that, to have an influence over Mr. Hun Sen. Is normalization, to treat Cambodia government as a full member of in the world community. There was one very important point made by Mr. Kyopi. I think another, it was already Phil Robertson already said, it was that no retribution should be made in the post-elections, and that the opposition party is willing to guarantee that. But Mr. Hun Sen or the CPP people will not believe it until this sense of isolation is mitigated by a outwardly more outward demonstration of the relationship that is being held back now, and treat Mr. Hun Sen as a legitimate government.
Any responses or additional?
I'm just doing internal reflections about creating this group because we have a special UN reporters on Cambodia, which report all the human rights situation issues, as is already included in this report here, to the UN Secretary General and the member of the UN there. So are we proposing another committee in order to bring the 18 signatories to focus on attention of the Paris peace accords here, or to the UN Secretary General? How these two roles possibly overlap with each other about that, together with the ASEAN members? That's my question.
Can you repeat it again?
I mean, we have UN special reporters on human rights in Cambodia. Cambodia quite unique among 192 members of UN there because of the human rights and because of link to the Paris Peace Accords there. We have this special human rights reporter to report and update human rights situation to the UN Secretary Generals there. So when we propose if we are going to agree on proposing to create these committees to focus and bring the attention of the 18 signatories to the Paris Peace Accords, then will these two roles overlapping each other? My question.
I would say not, because the actual role of some secretariat of that sort, if there was such a secretariat created amongst the Paris Peace Accord signatories, the closest role it would be similar to, for instance, what the Human Rights Council does, because that is also composed of member states. You know, the special rapporteur is an independent expert on human rights focused on Cambodia. I think plays a very different role than, because this person has really a sort of a fact-finding and recommendation role. That's what she does, and I think that's different from what would be done with those findings and the recommendations, which is what, for instance, the Human Rights Council or some sort of signatory Paris Peace Accord signatory group might do. So I see them as being essentially separate. I would also make the point that Cambodia is not so unique. I mean, there are a number of different countries with country-specific mandates who are special rapporteurs. Within the region, we still have a Burmese special rapporteur. We have a special rapporteur on North Korea. There are a number of African countries and other countries where also there have been special procedures set up that are focusing on a particular country's situation. So don't buy into the argument of the Cambodian government that they're being singled out, because there are plenty of other governments with bad human rights records that are also facing these kind of scrutiny from the UN Human Rights Council and special procedures.
Okay, I think the special rapporteur will be here very soon, so I'll kind of wrap this up.
I just want to add.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very briefly, please.
Yes, very brief. I love both you and your ideas. We understand the government is very isolated. That's why the people like us, the people who love human rights and democracy, have to stand up. And that's why I asked you if you have any mechanism that the people like us can go to you as a regional platform, that we can say, can we go to the 18 countries who signed the peace agreement? Can we go to the UN platform? Because I believe that if the grassroots people like us can go to you, to the region, to the 18 countries, I believe that the government will not feel isolated anymore. Thank you.
Already there are collaboration from Thailand, but only in cases that Thai entities like Thai corporations come and exploit and disenfranchise Cambodians, like in Gokong and other areas that they were forced to many thousands of families were removed because of investments from Thailand. And we collaborate very closely with the opposition party here, even though I'm closer to the CPP in history. But however, the Thais have built a dam in the Mekong River. I'll give you an example. On the mainstream of the Mekong in Laos, with Thai money, Thai everything, Thai banks, Thai companies, and it will block the water and the fish from coming into Cambodia. It will affect Cambodia a lot, its ecosystem. And we protested in Thailand on this. And also we collaborated with the opposition party, whereby you had 20 senators, from the opposition party writing to the Thai Prime Minister, write a petition against them. This type of collaboration, it's already happening. It's already happening, but it doesn't seem to have any effect. So we have no power of enforcement because Laos is a sovereign country, and they don't hear us enough. That is the big problem. You see, members of the Paris Accord, most of them have now become authoritarian or remain authoritarian. Thailand was a democratic one and now is an authoritarian one, for instance. But it won't stop you and I, our communities, from working together, you see. We must collaborate even more, even with our, I don't think people in the panel here even know what we've done, what Kiyopirom, myself, and Sonchai have done, you see. So, and most of you in this room don't even know. So there are there are, there are collaboration, but what more is that there should be more collaboration within this 20th anniversary of Peace Accord among ourselves, you see, of what individual or members have been doing in the past. Sharing information and making it globally public. Perhaps that is should be one of our initiative on the 21st anniversary. People in this meeting, we should have our own accord here. See, in the case of Cambodia. You get my drift?
Absolutely, I think that's a very good point. I think even in Steve's session too, it was a highlight where communication with the locals, communication with those on the ground. It's really important for us to really ask them what they want, what is needed, what's really going on. So I think that's definitely very important for us to keep in mind, especially taking the 25th as a starting point to kind of do this more push to bring more change to Cambodia. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll take a short break before we have the special rapporteur come in and have her dialogue with you.